Thank you everybody for joining us for this CPD, and we're going to do some workshop later. I'll run through the agenda. I'll start with some fun. Okay, so 40 years ago, Milliken started manufacturing carpet tiles in Wigan. Hi guys. So we are celebrating 40 years of manufacturing. So this is a picture of me. I'm the one on the left, by the way. Any Irish clients here or customers? Anyone from Ireland? No? Well, this is me in 1986 winning the Texaco art competition. And actually, when I think about it, I may have peaked at that age, right? I did go on to do a degree in illustration, but I think if you look at my artwork through that period, it probably didn't get much better than this. For a quiz question, do you know what I painted? Close. Well, I mean, it's a good shout, right? I mean,
koala.
Who said a koala? Manisha said a koala. Yeah. I think at that age, I didn't know what a koala was. I thought it might have been a cocktail. Anyone else? Donkey? Yeah, it was a mouse. Oh, yeah, it was a mouse. Of course. That's why I won first prize, right? They were like, what is this? Okay. So, sorry, my name is Alex Kaplock, and I'm a senior account manager at Milliken / tortured artist. And I'm joined here by Manisha. So we'll run through our agenda for today. So we're going to go through our CPD seminar for designing for NeuroInclusive Workplaces, which should take us about 45 minutes. And we're going to move on to a mood board workshop session, which I hope you're very excited about. That should take us about 20 minutes, and then we'll maybe chat through it afterwards, and we'll have some time for questions and answers. I spoke to Erva earlier, and we'll have some lunch on as well. So I hope you guys can hang out with us for as long as you can. So this is the CPD seminar. What I would say at the start, obviously, senior account manager at Milliken, tortured artist. I'm not an expert in neurodiversity, but I can obviously have my own experiences of it and can talk conversationally about it as we run through it. I'm joined by Manisha. Manisha is part of our design team, so she helps create all the beautiful products that Milliken make, okay? And Manisha will take over about halfway through to talk about all the design side of it, right, Manisha? So, welcome to our CPD seminar, Designing for NeuroInclusive Workplaces, a focus on floor coverings. This is a RIBA-assessed and approved CPD presentation and is part of the core curriculum. The seminar provides design considerations when specifying floor coverings for NeuroInclusive work environments. The presentation starts by explaining what neurodiversity means and the challenges and opportunities neurodivergent employees present for the workplace. It goes on to review the legislation relating to neuroinclusive design and key sensitivities that architects and designers need to be aware of when designing and specifying floor coverings for a neurodivergent workforce. With example installations, the seminar illustrates how floor coverings can best support the design of neuroinclusive workspaces. By the end of the seminar, we will give you an understanding of what neurodiversity means and why it matters for designing workplaces, the relevant standards and legislation relating to the design of neuroinclusive interiors, the factors that should be considered when specifying floor covering products for a neurodiverse workforce, how the floor plane can be best used as part of a neuroinclusive interior, how thoughtful design can improve the comfort, focus and efficiency of neurodivergent employees. So firstly, to introduce Milliken for anyone not familiar with the company. Since 1865, Milliken and Company has been innovating science-based solutions designed to make people's lives better. The company operates across 4 key sectors, of which Milliken Floor Coverings is one. Milliken is very much an innovative company, so we make lots of different products, not just floor coverings. So for instance, is everyone familiar with the recent lunar mission that was called the Artemis? So Milliken made the fire retardant material that the astronauts used. So Milliken make lots and lots of different products. Still family owned, the company maintains a strong ethical and environmental focus, which has led to Milliken being one of only 6 companies to appear on the world's most ethical companies list since the award was founded in 2007. Milliken has ambitious sustainability commitments set out in the company's 5th sustainability report and is accessible online at milliken.com. In floor coverings, Milliken has global coverage with a regional structure. Our commercial carpet tile production facility in Wigan, Lancashire, services Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and India. Milliken's entire range of floor covering solutions is carbon neutral and includes carpet tile, LVT, woven vinyl tile, and entrance flooring solutions. On the subject of neuroinclusive design, Milliken has published a white paper in partnership with workplace specialists Hennigan Consulting Group and Sapio, an independent market research agency. The white paper, entitled Designing a Neuroinclusive Workplace, uses the latest in research on neurodiversity in business and direct insights from participants who share their experiences of being neurodivergent.
We're just going to mic you up.
We're going to get you guys. Sorry, folks, we're going to get Alex and Alicia mic'd up so that we can hear a little bit further.
Okay.
Just give
Yeah.
us 5 seconds.
I'll start again.
Is that all right? You don't. I can just leave the pack
Is that okay?
on there, and you don't have to carry it. Thank you.
Okay. So the white paper, is that okay? So the white paper, entitled Designing a Neuroinclusive Workplace, uses the latest in research on neurodiversity in business and direct insights from participants who share their experiences of being neurodivergent. This seminar takes its lead from the findings of this white paper and applies its learnings to the specification of floor coverings. The white paper can be sent to you as an additional reference point after the seminar, and I think we'll do that if you're happy. Let's look first at what is meant by neurodiversity and clarify some terminologies used in this arena. Neurodiversity refers to the breadth of human cognitive functioning. It is a blanket term that explains the range wait for it of differences in ways that individual brains can function. Technically, it refers to everyone. The concept was pioneered by the Australian sociologist Judy Singer as a way to describe brains that function differently to those seen as typical, now referred to as neurotypical. These differences are on a sliding scale and can cover many different diagnoses and conditions, professionally referred to as neurotypes. The term neurodivergent refers to individuals with one or more of these neurotypes, such as autism spectrum disorder, dyslexia, dyspraxia, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, and tic disorders such as Tourette syndrome. Oh. Apologies, that was... So, what neurotypes are you aware of? So, I'm sure you're aware of a lot of these different terminologies. The term neurodivergent also includes a range of neurological challenges related to environmental causes, brain injury, and mental health challenges such as bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and eating disorders. The official list of neurotypes comes from DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illnesses. Neurodiversity is now becoming an umbrella term for wider conversations about different conditions such as long COVID, PTSD, and schizophrenia, and speaks to a wider movement of understanding about diversity and complexity in our cognitive functioning. I was going to ask you, are you aware of most of these conditions? The one which I wasn't aware of, which is dyscalculia. Is anyone aware of that one? Yeah. 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 Yeah, dyscalculia on my notes can cause maths to be a challenge, but also present difficulties with directions or time telling. Okay, so co-occurrence of several neurotypes is relatively common and presents with overlapping symptoms and experiences. These experiences are often related to being hypersensitive or highly sensitive to sensory input, or hyposensitive, where more sensory input is required. This is particularly important to understand when considering the implications on office design. Designers should be considering areas of both high stimulation and low stimulation. It is important to remember we all have unique brains, and so whilst it can be helpful for us to understand common traits in a particular condition or neurotype, neurodivergence is infinitely varied, and so even two people with the same neurotype will experience things differently. There is a phrase commonly used that illustrates this point. If you have met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So why is understanding neurodiversity so important in the workplace? So let's do a little quiz. So some audience participation. What proportion of people in the UK do you think is neurodiverse? 15 to 20%. Okay. In the past 2 decades, how much have autism diagnoses increased as a percentage? About 50%? Okay. 40, 50?
Anybody else? 300.
Who said 300? Yeah, okay. 787. I mean, you're close, but you're not even close. But but you're in the right frame of mind there. In the past 2 decades, in the UK, autism has increased by 787%, and prescriptions for ADHD medication have jumped 800%. We are also experiencing a post-pandemic boom in neurodivergent diagnostic referrals, with some NHS waiting lists up to 8 years long, and even private referrals are up to 2 years. There is now a much greater awareness and growing understanding generally about some of these conditions. There is another question. On average, how much more productive are neurodiverse teams than neurotypical ones? 60?
No, that's a guess. Anybody else? 40%.
You've lost your confidence. Go on. What do you think?
Maybe 50?
Okay. It is 30%. So we're going to look at that further in the next slide. Question 4. What is the rate of unemployment for neurodivergent people compared to neurotypical people? 60 times more? Okay. It is 8 times more. This can be because their behaviors may not fit in ways that neurotypical people learn or are required to fit in. Okay. Problematic slide, I get it. But I've got to stick to the CPD, okay? Just wanted to get that out there. So according to the National Autistic Society, 45% of neurodivergent people have lost or left their job because of challenges due to being misunderstood. Today, only 1 in 16 autistic adults are in full-time employment. Instead of seeing a natural variation of thinking as something broken to be pathologized and fixed, successful neurodivergent leaders like Richard Branson, Elon Musk, and IKEA founder Ingvar Kamprad have championed the strengths and potential commercial advantages of neurodivergent thinking. There is a real business case here. There is a real business case here to design workspaces where neurodivergent employees can thrive. Creative insights, thinking outside of the box, problem solving, and visual spatial capability are all being recognized as benefits neurodivergent people bring to their workplace. Neurodivergent people often have recorded higher IQ scores, especially among those with autism, and as referenced earlier, studies have found that neurodiverse teams are 30% more productive than neurotypical ones and make fewer errors. The research from Birkbeck University of London demonstrates the degree to which these key strengths of hyperfocus, creativity, innovative thinking, detailed processing, and authenticity are found in neurodivergent people. Savvy employers have already begun to see the competitive advantage, with companies like JP Chase, Deloitte, Microsoft, and Google having prominent neurodiversity programs and recruitment strategies with results that justify the efforts. JP Chase reported that after 3 to 6 months of working in its mortgage banking technology group, autistic employees were doing the work of people who typically require 3 years to train and were 50% more productive. Going back to our earlier slide, listing some of the very different neurotypes, when approaching workplace design, this infinite variation of neurodiversity can seem overwhelming. However, there are a handful of neurotypes that together constitute a large proportion of all neurodevelopmental diagnoses that between them cover a spectrum of sensory requirements. This is a valuable place to start. Yeah. According to ADHD Aware, in the UK, it is estimated that 10% of people are thought to have dyslexia, 8% of people ADHD, 8% dyspraxia, 6% dyscalculia, and 1% autism. Further details of the specific traits and behavior for these and other conditions can be found in the white paper and through the various organizations that support people with these conditions. Many workplaces can be exceptionally challenging for those that struggle to focus, deal with distraction, regulate emotions, cope with exposure to multiple stimuli, or communicate immediately and effectively. This requires a combination of operational policy and design considerations. That means creating working norms and practices, as well as places where neurodivergent workers can thrive. We are going to look primarily at the design considerations and place aspect with a focus on how carefully considered specification of floor coverings can help. It is worth considering that this challenge is not just limited to neurodivergent populations. Designers have long experienced pushback against open plan and the perception of the extra noise and distraction that bothers the average neurotypical introvert. Neurotypical populations also have their variances, tolerances, and preferences. This has been heightened by the recent changes toward hybrid and remote working. For neurodivergent employees, controlling these aspects of their working day are not just about comfort, but sometimes about the ability to function, all whilst maintaining physical and mental health. Before we move on to the next section on how we can design neuro-inclusive workplaces, there are some key pieces of legislation and some standards relating to inclusive design to be aware of. Number one is the Equality 2010, recognizes that all non-neurodivergent workers will consider themselves to be disabled. Workers have the right to identify or not identify with the term as they see fit. Under this piece of legislation, neurodivergent workers are, however, likely to meet the legal definition of disability. This provides them with important rights to reasonable adjustments in the workplace. Number two is the National Building Regulations. Part M refers specifically to the access and use of buildings. Number three, the British Standards BS 8300-1-2018 and BS 8300-2-2018, Design of an Accessible and Inclusive Built Environment. Number four, published in July 2023, RIBA's Inclusive Design Overlay to the RIBA plan work is a collaborative piece of work with contributions from over 100 professionals from across 25 different built environment professions, offering insight and best practice into inclusive design. Number five, the International Well Building Institute's standard certification is also relevant here, with concepts such as mind, comfort, light, and air, all relevant to neuro-inclusive design. And you are in a platinum showroom today. And finally, also from BSI, Design for the Mind is a public access specification document which includes useful guidance on designing for neuro-inclusive environments. There are references to this document throughout the presentation. Okay, so let's look at what factors need to be considered when specifying floor coverings for neuro-inclusive environments. So given the varying sensitivities to sensory input and neurodivergent people's experience, it's helpful to consider the design and specification aspects of floor covering in terms of those key areas of sensitivity that we need to be mindful of: hearing, vision, touch, and smell. Before we explore each of these areas, it is also worth considering how they relate to the concepts and features of the WELL building standard. There's clearly a direct relationship between some of the senses and standards, health and well-being concepts such as air, sense of smell, and sound, and the sense of hearing. Others are more generally relevant, such as the mind and community concepts, which can relate to multiple senses. We will reference these as we go through the seminar. Let's start with hearing. So noise is one of the biggest influences on well-being for people with differences in sensory processing and can have a significant physiological and psychological impact. While most neurotypical people can adjust to a variation in noise levels, this can be much harder for individuals with a range of sensory processing differences. Unwanted sound interference with concentration and focus is often one of the most common complaints about the modern office, particularly in open plan workspaces. My wife, when I left this morning to come to CDW, she has ADHD, and she works for a well-known tech company. And she was explaining that she needed to move desk because where she was sitting was just heavy traffic. She just couldn't cope with it. So with sound, there is a paradox. Too quiet and even a whisper elsewhere hooks our attention, and we have to mentally block the experience to refocus. Too loud and we have to raise our own voices to be heard, which of course compounds the issue by raising ambient noise levels. Colleagues can experience cognitive stress at both ends of the spectrum by trying to hear each other, or indeed by deliberately trying not to hear each other. In fact, HCG, who conducted the white paper research, found that sound and distraction are some of the most cited reasons for people preferring to work from home. So workplace acoustics are incredibly important to everyone. Research shows how hearing someone talking while you're reading or writing can not only reduce productivity by up to 66%, but can also lead to poor health outcomes, including stress, anxiety, sleep disorders, and hypertension. For neurodivergent brains, sound can cause even greater cognitive stress and sensory overload. Neurotypical brains are better able to filter excess interference sounds, for example, of people talking near to a workstation. For neurodivergent brains, this can become extremely debilitating and excessively draining on their cognitive resources, and is especially problematic for those that have conditions with processing disorders, hypersensitivity, or those that involve misphonia, an extreme sensitivity to pattern-based sounds such as tapping, ticking, humming, or chewing. Considering acoustics early in the design process is important to ensure that the most effective acoustic zoning is applied and finishes specified. This isometric represents a typical office environment. As with any workplace, the floor plane is one of the largest surfaces and one that we come into contact with virtually all the time. Given what we have learned so far about the different sensory needs of neurodivergent employees, this example illustrates how clearly defined inclusive areas can be created. Each specific space is color-coded according to degrees of hyper and hyposensitivity to sensory input. Considering acoustics first, providing variety and choice of space to work is crucial. There are areas here that are deliberately designed as more active or noisy zones, such as the collaboration area in the center, and some that are quieter, more low traffic zones shown at the top. The floor covering can be used effectively to identify and demarcate these areas. Dedicated quiet areas such as such as the hyperfocus zone, shown here top right, can be either open or closed spaces dedicated to supporting intense concentration and are important for many neurodivergent people. We will come back to this model workspace when we consider the visual aspects of floor covering. The floor covering can be used to identify anticipated noise levels as part of the description of spaces. Color association can help neurodivergent brains to identify a space and distinguish between loud and busy zones from quieter or segregated zones. This, of course, can be done with the floor covering, but also supported with furnishings, wall panels, and other office features. Consider using spatial and behavioral design together to indicate a person's availability to be interrupted. Quiet spaces that are also do not disturb spaces are a way for colleagues to signal their needs. The availability of quieter spaces, including enclosed quiet rooms and semi-enclosed quieter zones, provide an option to escape if a noisy over-simulation environment becomes intolerable, which we can see in example 1 on the far left. So personal acoustic control can be provided by supplying noise-cancelling headphones or earplugs with varying degrees of decibel reduction, from in my bubble style noise reduction to reduce ambient noises but still hear sound, to complete noise cancelling, which you can see in the center picture. However, don't assume quiet focused spaces should be one-person booths, which can sometimes also feel claustrophobic. Sometimes people want the company, just not the noise. So library zones can work well in this instance, like we see on the right-hand side. This example shows a control space with control stimuli of noise. When it comes to materials, and particularly floor coverings, often fashionable hard surfaces like metal, glass, and stone will increase reverberation and noise levels, so should be used sparingly or mindfully with other softer materials. The addition of sound-absorbing materials such as acoustic-enhanced floor coverings will reduce the reverberation and echo within a space, but also reduce sound transmission between floors and into adjacent spaces. Of all the surfaces in a workspace, the floor is by far the largest producer of impact sound, from footfall in busy walkways to furniture movement and objects being dropped. These graphs show how different types of floor covering materials can vary quite significantly in how they absorb and generate noise, including hard floor surfaces, hard back carpets, and varying degrees of cushion back carpet tiles. This graph on the left demonstrates the noise reduction coefficient, the material's ability to absorb noise. The graph on the right illustrates reverberation noise or echo noise, where noise reflects off surfaces. As you can see, the cushion back materials have a significant impact on that noise reduction. Once again, variety and choice are important. In addition to cushion back carpet tiles, some LVT products now have an acoustic enhancement to help sound absorption, particularly impact noise, of which Milliken has an LVT that does that. A sound mapping exercise can be done to better understand the acoustic levels of each space. Touch. The second sense we will look at is touch. For floor coverings, this incorporates texture and comfort and relates to the materials and mind concepts from the WELL building standard. Tactile properties of surface finishes such as flooring can also become important for neurodivergent brains. Contrast in feel underfoot of different floor finishes can be used to provide a tactile sensation that aids people with sight impairments. And as we saw earlier, a change of texture in floor coverings can also help everyone with navigating or orientating in a space. When two different thicknesses of floor finishes are laid adjacent to one another, transition strips allow a seamless change from different levels. Where a trim is required, a shiny or visually contrasting trim should be avoided, as it can cause confusion or hesitation for some people. Colors matching one or other of the floor finishes are preferred. Throughout the white paper research, the interviewees mentioned the desire to be able to recalibrate, or decompress at work. In our busy, high-tech, high-stimulus world of work, a desire to escape is echoed in neurotypical as well as neurodivergent populations. Building spaces purely to mitigate and provide contrast to the office can be achieved by incorporating biophilia and natural materials and in comfortable spaces. Once the issues that people face are recognized, they often have a simple practical solution that can be implemented. Employers often assume that creating a neuro-inclusive workplace will be a time-consuming and complex undertaking. Open and honest communication about requirements and best practice can debunk this myth and create a wider, healthy dialogue about healthy and inclusive workplaces. So the next sense to consider is the sense of smell, perhaps a less obvious one for the workplace. This relates to directly to the air concept in the WELL building standard. Along with taste, smell is arguably one of the most powerful senses in stimulating the emotional and memory center of the brain. I would say I have a very good sense of smell, and I always think it's both a blessing and a curse. So sensescaping, where smells are designed to enhance experiences, are frequently used in retail and hospitality environments. Even in the workplace, research has shown that focus and performance can be improved through the smell of coffee. For neurodiverse people, hypersensitivity to smell can make scent not just disruptive, but intrusive, with potential side effects, including anxiety and panic, nausea and dizziness. This can be exacerbated, and if there are other sensory stimuli present, such as loud noises and large crowds, other involuntary smells or odors should also be considered. These can include volatile organic environments, or VOCs, common chemical compliance found in materials such as paints, fabrics, furnishings, and finishes, including floor coverings. For the workplace, these can all contribute to the scentscape. VOCs can be present in some floor coverings and the adhesive used for their installations. There are a number of organizations that certify products in accordance with strict international test protocols to guide you towards products that maintain good indoor air quality with low level VOC emissions. Among the most recognized of these for carpet are Carpet and Rug Institute Green Label Plus and GUT, the German-based environmentally friendly carpet association, which represents manufacturers whose products have been stringently tested for hard surface flooring materials. SCS Global Services Floor Score Mark is one of the most recognized certification body for indoor air quality. Carpet and LVT products are also now available that minimize and eliminate the use of adhesives altogether. Materials used in the maintenance of floor covering should also be considered for their VOC levels. And I'm going to hand over to Manisha.
Right. Just give me a sec.
I'm conscious that I'm mic'd up.
Yeah, you're mic'd
Yeah.
up. Anyway. Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Hi guys, so I'm Manisha and I'm the print designer at Milliken. So we get involved in carpet designs and customization at Milliken. But today I'm going to talk about vision. So Alex has talked about the other senses, but I've left this at the end because this groups nicely with pattern, design, colour. So there's multiple aspects to consider here. So when we look at vision, there's all of these: the colour, pattern, contrast, light reflectance, and wayfinding, which is really key. So, like I say, I'm going to go through all of these, but in terms of the WELL building standard, this can actually have an impact on mind, movement, and the community concepts. So let's go back and have a look at this floor plan. So in terms of visual stimuli, so each space is defined, it's labelled according to the colour codes here, and the colour codes are linked to hyper or hyposensitivity here. So the red dots are the hyper, So this is where people need less. Too much visual information is just too chaotic. So the red dots are hyper, where people need less. The blue dots indicate the hyposensitive. So these are the high stimulation zones where greater visual interest is needed. These are spaces for collaboration, for socializing, for connecting, for engaging. So the pink and the turquoise dots they're the mid-stimulation areas. So here we can build in a certain level of stimuli around the areas to encourage communication and engagement. So it's all about creating that balance. Where you need more, build in more. Where you need less, tone it down. So the yellow dots represent sort of creative spaces. So you've got the creative walls, you've got the media displays, so you can have this sort of communication, the work community messaging on there. And these can provide a really positive distraction. So like I think Alex has already mentioned in his slide, you can't assume that sort of focused areas are just one-person booths because actually they're quite claustrophobic. I mean, I don't know if I can feel comfortable working in them for a prolonged period of time. So this, we can't just assume things. People do want company, people do want interactivity. They just don't want absolute silence or too much noise. So the key thing is creating these micro environments where there's different levels of visual stimuli throughout the building. So it creates an option for flexibility and choice. So in terms of colour psychology, we all know that colours resonate with us in terms of feelings, mood. So blues are calming, but if you use too much, it can give you the blues. Yellows encourage positivity. Reds can be really energising, but actually too much can cause agitation. Green is stress relieving because it is reflective of nature. Violets, lavenders, pinks are soothing. Browns are associated with safety, resilience. So we all know that colour totally impacts visual comfort and sensory regulation. So, and especially more so for people with heightened sensitivities. So we all need to, obviously we know that busy colour schemes or anything too colour contrasting, it causes fatigue, it causes strain, and it causes difficulty in processing and filtering information. So when we're looking at colour, we really need to be aware that everybody experiences colour in a different way. And this example is a perfect way to highlight how a person with normal vision sees the colours at the top, and then with slightly different variations to sort of visual sensitivities, this is how colours look totally different to others. So I think this is really important to bear in mind. So sometimes when you've got multiple vivid and really strong colours put together, they can appear like they're moving or shimmering, which can be really disorientating. ADHD adults tend to struggle with the blue and yellow recognition. So, and in terms of colour blindness, the most common form is the red and green colour blindness, which does affect 1 in 200 women and as many as 1 in 12 men, which is really interesting. So in terms of visual content, how and where we use pattern is really important. It's got to fit the place it's meant to sort of accommodate. So here is a perfect example of how not to do things. So this is a pattern, it's a wall paneling on a restaurant in one of those seating booths, and it actually made people sick. It physically made people sick because if you sort of blur your eyes, for me, the elements are moving. If you sort of blur my eyes, I can see movement. The cream shapes are bouncing out. So some things just don't work. So that obviously had to be removed. So when you've got repeating geometric elements, sometimes or stripes or bands on a floor, they do appear to be moving. So we've got to be really mindful that we can't use those in a stairwell or in walkways where people rely on sort of direct information on the floors. So here are some examples of how carpet design and colour choice can really help to create a variety of inclusive spaces. So on the left, we've got a low stimuli work environment. So this is a really light and airy, neutral colour scheme. We've got tonal carpets, we've got beautiful curved wood screening, which provides a really quiet and calm space to focus. So next we've got the pods, and as we're moving along, there's a bit more visual interest because we're moving towards a hyposensitive areas. So the pods, this is where individuals can work in isolation, you can concentrate, but actually there's still pattern, there's still movement, there's grays, but there's tonally balanced grays for the mid-stimulation. And in the third image, there's a bit more complex patterning on the floor, there's a bit more colour. We've got coordinating colours on the walls in that third picture, which creates a warm and welcoming space, which could be used as a collaboration space. So lastly, on the last image is the hyposensitive end. So this is the high stimulation end. This is a breakout area where there's really strong pattern, there's really strong colour mixes on the floor covering and also in the furnishings. And it just creates a really energized space for socializing and collaborating and just engaging with others. So it's all about creating that different level of visual information in different spaces. So looking at contrast levels, so in pattern and in colors. So some neurodivergent brains have a low contrast sensitivity, so they actually need more visual interest, so they need higher contrasting designs to help them differentiate between spaces. So on the left here, we've got we've got a distinctive line, the black line that separates the floor surface from the wall surface. And on the right, again, we've got the same thing with the black line, which is the differentiator. But in the carpet choices, the carpet in the room, in the little section there, the carpet pattern is totally different to the carpet pattern that is outside of that space. So again, it helps to provide a distinctive break between spaces that helps with orientation. So excessive contrast or really low, when the contrast levels are too low, it can help, it can actually hinder, not help, it can hinder visibility, navigation and accessibility. So it's about getting that balance right. So this is a lovely example. I love to show this because I love this interior scheme. You know, you've got a high stimulation workplace, strong imagery, beautiful imagery on the walls. You've got the lovely carpet pattern on the floor with rich colour tones. And to me, it creates an energized workspace. But actually, so this is great for neurodivergents who need this visual stimuli to help them work better. But actually, this could be massive sensory overload for others. It could just be too much visual noise. So I'm saying I love it, but I don't know how I'm going to be after working there for 8 hours when someone's tapping away at the laptop and when people are talking. It could possibly be all too much. But we're not saying not to have these sort of schemes. By all means have them because they're beautiful and they do work for individuals, but then provide a choice of having areas which have less. So it's all about, you know, where possible, have that choice. So this is an example of a uniform LVT floor covering, and here we've got 2 colours of the same product, which helps to create that walkway and provides orientation throughout the building. So for hard surfaces, we've really got to bear in mind that they've got to be matte, they've got to be low sheen, because otherwise, if it's got a shiny surface, it can appear to be wet or slippery, which can cause confusion for those, especially with sensory processing difficulties. So wayfinding is absolutely key in terms of designing inclusive workspaces. So neurodivergents, they need, and actually they thrive on predictability, on clear boundaries and on repetition. You know, they need to be able to feel safe because they need to know the space. So neurodivergents, well, some neurodivergents have an aversion to looking ahead, they actually look down. So in these sort of instances, deliberate directional pathing or deliberate use of colour for orientation is really key to help them navigate a space. So this is a really perfect example of that. So here we're using colour transitions as a wayfinding tool around the building. So transitions are really important as well. Not only do they softly ombre between a colour to another colour, it just provides that softness, whereas actually if we didn't have that transition, it would have been a hard, distinct line between 2 colours. And that light line between the orange and the greys, if it was a hard line, it could almost appear like you want to step down into a colour. It almost looks like it's a step. Yeah, so to avoid that, these transition patterns are really, really important. So it's all about creating unique landmarks and distinct features as well to create these memorable markers around a building. So on the right here, you've got this orange carpet on the floor, which is a distinct marker that directs you towards the reception. On the right, you've got mixed products here. So we're using LVT to provide this walkway. It provides a clear walkway to help with orientation, but it also sort of helps to avoid unnecessary traffic moving away in the workspaces. So here again, we're providing a really obvious and clear guideline. So it's all about predictable layouts, distinct landmarks, and logical sort of circulation solutions and this will all help to reduce uncertainty and cognitive load. So I'm going to put a question to you. So these are not actual installations. These are just visuals that we did on our visualizer online. So these are not actual real. But I want to ask you guys, why do you think these could be challenging in any way for neurodivergence? Has anybody got any idea for any of them? High contrast, yeah. So here, this is a walkway. So this is, in walkways, you really want to avoid super high contrast. It could be confusing, it could be disorientating. Anything for the middle one? Could that be, why do you think that could be challenging, the middle one?
There's no clear pathway.
Yeah, I think so. But for me, the planks that are sitting on top of the grade, they look like they're floating. They look like they're floating to me. So here, that's classed as visual noise. So, some way to sort of counteract this, we just use a different colour scheme. Don't use colours that are too contrasty. Use tonally balanced colours here in this case. The last one, this is repetitive banding. So sometimes repetitive banding can appear, again, to be moving or uneven. So in this case, instead of the herringbone layout, change it to a normal half drop layout, which would aid the directional aspect of a corridor. So all of these sort of actually really show how the choice of colour, the choice of pattern, the proportion of colour, and the installation methods all really make a difference. So let's talk about colour and pattern. So when we're talking about floor covering, so once we Milliken commissioned the white paper, our global studios came together and created a set of regional colour palettes. So I created two palettes, a warm one and a cool one here. I selected designs that were organic, that were easily digestible, that had soft patterning. And the way which we sort of decided upon was we have low stimulation products on the left, then gradually increase in terms of visual interest and texture. We're sort of increasing as they go along towards the high stimulation on the right. So this is just the basic format, but the next slide shows the actual first palette I created. So this is the warm blush colour palette. So pinks can be really soothing. It can help to create that soothing ambience in a workplace environment. It's a really popular choice and it's really relevant colour space. It still is even today for our market. So this is the format. So on the top, you've got the light option, the middle is the dark option, and the bottom row is the accent option. And the way the columns are demonstrated, so that's by pattern type. So you've got the solid, on the first column, you've got the organic, the gradations, and the patterns. So the first column are the solids, so those are for the focus areas. The second column are the organic patterns for the mid-stimulation. Gradation option, we felt we had to have that in because it's really effective for zoning and wayfinding. And the last column is pattern, where the category includes higher patterned designs. So alongside other finishes, pastel colours, as I've sort of mentioned, are really popular, but they're used to combat heightened sensitivity. So, when it just helps to create that soothing and calm atmosphere in a workspace that promotes well-being. So this is my second colour palette. The colours are not great, but it's a soft teal green colour palette. Again, this palette is really relevant, and more so because when we're considering colour blindness and we're considering the fact that people with ADHD have yellow and blue, they really struggle with yellow and blue recognition. So this colour space is really relevant. And also biophilic shapes and patterns that occur in nature, they create less noise, less visual noise. They're more sort of, we accept those patterns easier. So that's the basis on which I chose these type of patterns. So this is just a guideline. These two palettes are just to start that conversation about the fact that we're considering neuro-inclusive workspaces now. You know, we have had projects that have come through, and I'll show you another slide later. You know, people are talking about it, and this isn't going to go away. So, you know, we all need to sort of jump on board that, you know, and provide offerings where we are thinking about this. So this is a really good example of how colour association can help to identify a space. So here is a cool teal colour palette, and it helps to identify that this is a quiet working area that supports concentration. So here you've also got the adjustable light and heating controls to allow individuals to control their environment according to their comfort levels. So, you know, again, it's about being able to have that control in your workspace. So this is a colour palette I put together last year. It's for a specialist school that supported autistic children. So we were asked to produce, first we asked if we had a range that could aid something as specialist as this. And we don't have a collection, but what I did was I put together this broad colour palette based on my findings of neuro-inclusive designs on my palettes. I just expanded that actually. And I really thought about the uses of each room. So for classrooms, you know, there's a range here of subtle non-repeating patterns that really help with the visual processing. For reading rooms, there's warm, neutral colour tones. For the sensory rooms, there's non-stimulation, low contrast patterns. For quiet corners, there's balanced tonal products. For activity zones, there's biophilic designs and colours that all promote well-being. And transitional spaces, I've included transitions here to guide gentle movement. So I'm aware that high contrasting patterns can be really distracting. You know, we all know that, and it can actually increase, it can lower attention span and really increase the response time. So for children, it can be really distractive and disruptive. So I really focused on creating that calm, balanced palette here. So while everyone has a different sensitivity to colour, we all know that muted, low saturation colour palettes are generally more supportive in neuro-inclusive environments. So these square chips in the middle, I mean, the colour's not great, but you get an idea of the colour palettes here. So these were actually selected by autistic children. So these are sort of seen as ideal specific hues. So you'll see there's quite a big percentage of blues and greens. But blues and greens have a calming effect, so you sort of understand that really. So this is classed as an ASD-friendly colour palette. So overall, the colours are soft, they're muted, they're biophilic tones, but they're slightly greyed off, and that makes them even more subdued and even more digestible. So I'm actually surprised by it's actually quite a grey purple that's in there, but then purples and pinks and lilacs evoke that feeling of safety and comfort, so it sort of makes sense. So this is a mood board I put together. It was for a mid-stimulation setting. I looked at pattern that minimised distraction, but yet still retained that visual interest. So there's an emphasis on soft tactility, diffuse patterns. So I've got neutral colour tones here, the soft blues and greys and earth-based tones here that really support emotional regulation. So this colour palette, I think, offers presence without intensity. So that sort of wraps it up for my presentation side of it in terms of design and colour. So I want to now, if you can all take part, I'd love that, because actually for me, it's really subjective. You know, I put these mood boards together and these colour palettes together. I'm a neurotypical creative. My perspective to high stimulation, low stimulation is going to differ to yours. You know, so we've got a room full of creatives in this space, and I'd love to understand what your perception is. You know, if you were to design a neuro-inclusive space, what does your low-level stimuli look like? What does high-level? What is too much? You know, at what point is design too much? At what point is colour too much? You know, so I'd be really interested to get your idea of this. So we've set up a quick task, a really quick task. If at all possible, you can contribute. I'd love that. So the aim is to build a neuro-inclusive mood board from the floor plane up. So obviously an interior scheme. Think about the floor pattern. So you can work individually, you can work in pairs, you can work however you want to, but pick a typical workspace. Got loads of swatches here. build a mood board, think about your floor plan, think about your finishes and accents, and a design intent. What is it you feel? It could be bullet points, a few words, anything. I'd be really interested to get your perception of this. So, would you be at all willing to participate in this? I'd really love it if you did, because the girls have put a lot of effort into putting all these things together. And like I say, everyone's idea of what balance is right for an interior is different, So